Every day he is watching from the heavens and the skies, and he scans the horizon looking for the sign of a son or a daughter with a prodigal heart, coming back to the Father of love. And the shepherd is searching for the sheep who's gone astray. Though there's 99 safe at the closing of the day, his pursuit is relentless, his obsession divine. It's the heart of the Father of life. His compassion is for everyone. Yeah, for the lost and the afraid. And if you listen, you can hear his voice. Hear him calling. Hear him calling your name. Seen my beloved, he is radiant and most fair. In the evening he calls me, I can see his shadow there. I will rise up to meet him, I will run to his side, the Son of the Father of life. Oh, your compassion is for everyone. Yeah, for the lost and the afraid. And
Wednesday ReLaunch. Lovely to see you here today, have you with us in the building. Lovely to welcome those of you who join us online. I know quite a number of you do, either live as it is now or later, but wherever you are, whenever it is, welcome to you as well. Great to have you here. I'm not always here. A couple of weeks back, you'll be aware if you're a regular here. We had Andrew starting us off on looking at the letter that Paul wrote to Philemon. That's because I was helping Susan look after grandchildren on that particular day. 2 grandchildren on that occasion, 2 boys, 5 and 3, and the older one is just into jokes. He doesn't really understand how jokes work other than that there is a basic formula. And so it would be generally why did X, Y, or Z come through the door? And you're not meant to do anything other than say, I don't know. And then he gives an answer that is just nonsense, but you're meant to laugh because he's understood that's the kind of formula for jokes like that. Why do you never see elephants hiding in trees? I don't know, is what you say, and the answer is because they're good at it. Why do geese fly south in winter? I don't know, because if they walked, it would take too long. That sort of thing. Why did the fungi leave the fungus? I don't know, because there was too much mushroom, and that sort of thing. There's a good one about scuba divers. Why, and you've maybe even thought about this, why do scuba divers fall backwards into the water? To which you say, I don't know. And the answer is, if they fell forwards, they'd still be in the boat, if you think about it. That sort of thing. That sort of joke always starts the question, why? And that question, why, of course, is not always a laughing matter at all. Very often it's the cry, the groan of our hearts, even in the conversation already before coming up here today. That question has come up a few times. Why? Why has this been happening to me? Why has that happened in this place or that place? And often it is a pained question. Why? And that really is essentially what we're just going to look at in this next little bit of Paul's letter that he wrote to this guy Philemon. Philemon was it would seem, quite a wealthy guy, quite a well-to-do businessman. He lived in what is now Turkey, at a place probably called Colossae. That's probably where he lived. And the background to it is his slave, a man called Onesimus, had run away, and had ended up miles away in Rome, which happened to be where Paul was. And Onesimus had kind of bumped into Paul. Their paths had crossed. And as a consequence, obviously Paul had told him and explained the gospel to him. Onesimus had become a Christian. And now Paul, in writing this letter, was sending this guy back to Philemon, his rightful owner. And we're going to pick up at verse 12, put the words on the screen for you. Paul says, I'm sending him, the guy's called Onesimus, his name means useful. I'm sending him who is my very heart back to you. I would have liked to keep him with me so that he could take your place in helping me while I'm in chains for the gospel. But I did not want to do anything without your consent so that any favor you do would not seem forced but would be voluntary. Perhaps the reason he was separated from you for a little while was that you might have him back forever, no longer as a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother. He's very dear to me, but even dearer to you, both as a fellow man and as a brother in the Lord. Now, it's instructive for us to just listen in to what Paul is saying to this guy Philemon as he writes to him, because I think Paul recognized that Philemon would have had a range of emotions that are quite similar to the ones that we often experience. There would be an element of anger. There would be an element of being wronged. There would be an element, I think probably in terms of the way that society worked back then, economies worked, an element of being harmed by his no longer having the services of this guy, Onesimus, who had been doing a job for him, been serving him, and an element perhaps even of being bereaved. a person taken from him that was important to him in the running of his household, and here he was no longer there. And in all those contexts, very often the question does arise in our minds and our hearts. Why? Why has this happened to me? Why has God allowed me to be bereaved at this particular juncture in my life? Why has God allowed me to be hurt and harmed in that way? Why has God allowed me to be wronged and so on? And very often behind all these emotions, there is that question. We are looking for some way of making sense of what otherwise seems just unfair, unhelpful, and unpromising for us. And we ask the question, why? And I think Paul is in some measure recognizing that Philemon would have been asking that question. So he does ask the question why and provides the answer. You see there on the screen the verse that I've left up there, verse 15 and then into verse 16. Perhaps, he says, perhaps the reason why this has happened. At the time, Philemon, I understand you're going to be angry. Your slave has run off, quite possibly actually having stolen stuff from Philemon. So angry at no longer having the services of this guy, angry at having been wronged, angry at having been financially harmed, and a whole load of stuff. Why has this happened? Why does God allow that sort of thing to happen? Philemon, a believer, Philemon, a man in whose home the church met. It was kind of house church. She would be quite an important figure in the church as well, probably. And why does God allow these things to happen to someone who is seeking to honor him, someone seeking to worship him, follow him, love him, and so on? Why does it happen? And Paul is very tentatively suggesting that even although we don't always understand at the time why things are happening, in hindsight, sometimes it's easier to begin to see that actually maybe God was doing something that is altogether better than what we'd been anticipating. And he suggests here to Philemon that there may be a couple of reasons why God has allowed this. First of all, he's essentially reminding Philemon that he may have lost a slave, but actually he's gained a brother as a result. That's the first thing that he's pointing to. Yes, Onesimus was simply your slave. And yes, you've lost that slave, but now in the way things have worked out, Onesimus ran away, ended up in Rome, met Paul, was converted there, came to faith, and was a changed man, and now he's coming back. Now he says, you don't just have a slave, you got a brother. You have a brother rather than just a slave. A whole different relationship now. God has been pleased to do something through circumstances that actually were harmful, were hurtful, were detrimental to you, that left you mystified, puzzled, and angry. But through that, God was at work doing something and now has given back to you something far, far better. So, Philemon, you're not the loser, even although at the time it felt like you were the loser. God doing something through that. That's the first reason that he suggests. Perhaps the reason was that, he said. And alongside that, he also says that what has happened means that Philemon now has not just a temporary asset, namely a slave, an employee. We should think of the slaves really as much more in the nature of an employee rather than a kind of ball and shackle chained individual back in the Roman way of working things. You now no longer just have a temporary asset, you have a permanent gift. You have a permanent blessing, one who will be a blessing to you, not just in time, but for eternity as well. And that's what you have got back now, someone who is forever going to be part of your family, part of your brotherhood, as it were, in Colossae and beyond. And it's that sort of perspective that Paul is suggesting. We often ask the question, why? And most times the answer is, I don't know. Very often I'm asked that question as a pastor, and I'm not entirely sure whether, in most cases, even if I did know the answer, that would take away the pain, take away the sorrow, take away the anger. The cry, why, is an expression often of our pain and our sorrow and our hurt. And yet behind that, we have a Savior in Jesus Christ who on the cross himself says, "Why have you forsaken me? Why have you forsaken me, O God?" We don't always know the answers. In fact, most times we don't know the answers. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an answer. And one writer once put it very helpfully like this. And I'll put it on the screen for you so that you can see it and conclude with it. Philip Yancey, in one of his books, and they're always worth reading, he said, "Faith means believing in advance what makes sense only in reverse." Faith means believing in advance what only makes sense in reverse. And there's a very real truth in that. We don't know why things happen, but we trust that there's this God who is wise, who is good, who knows what he's doing, and in time we will begin to see the sense in what God has allowed to happen and how God has worked all things together for good. Don't ask how he does it. I don't know how he does it, but he just does. He is wise, he is good, and faith means we trust him for that, even when we don't understand what he's doing. And that's the nature of it. And that, I think, is what Paul is reminding Philemon of here, as very gently he suggests to him, perhaps the reason why this has been allowed in the providence of God is, as you will see, for your good. You don't now just have a slave, you've got a brother, and not just for a period of time, but for eternity as well. May God himself encourage us in the face of our circumstances, which even today you may just be scratching your head and saying, "I don't know why this has been allowed. Why does that happen?" I don't know. You don't know. But there's a God who does and who will work all things together for good. We trust him for that. Faith means believing in advance what only makes sense in reverse. Let me just close then with a prayer. Living God, we're really glad that the one whom you sent, even your own beloved Son Jesus, as he hung on that cross, he had that why question on his lips. Genuine question that flowed from his pained heart in the face of the agony, the darkness, the depression, the pain that he experienced. Why? Glad to know that, because it means there's someone who does understand precisely what it's like to be in that position when we're left asking why, as so often we do. We're glad of that, and glad that you take pains to remind us all the way through the scriptures that you are absolutely wise, wonderfully wise, altogether good, and that you do amazingly work all things, absolutely all things, even the things that are painful in the here and now, even the things that are unfair in the here and now. You work all things together for the good of those whom you have called to be conformed to the likeness of your Son, Jesus. Help us then to trust you for that in the darkest and most painful days, and to be able to press on in the confidence that the day will come when, looking back, seeing things out of the rear view mirror, we're able to recognize just how wise and just how good you have been. Thank you for your goodness to us. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for your care of us. Would you take your word and seal it to our hearts today for our encouragement and comfort? And we ask it for Jesus Christ's sake. Amen. Good. Enjoy the rest of your lunch if you haven't already had that, and enjoy the rest of the day, the rest of the week, and as you relaunch into a second part of the day and second part of the week, all strength to you.